No doubt. Sorry about that. So my microphone, just realized my microphone was muted. Let me start all over again. Let me start over from the beginning. Welcome to the Inside the Lab weekly live show. Normally it's on a Saturday, but it is on a Sunday. It's coming in a little delayed. I do apologize about that. Had some things come up yesterday, but nonetheless, here we are. And I do believe I tweeted about it too, as I talked about wanting to get Monday's upload published and ready, but also at the beginning of the live stream before I realized the mic was muted, I was talking about how this live stream is going to be a lengthy topic. It's one of the reasons why I pushed the live stream back was because I didn't want it to be as later in the day, especially here for the time zone that here for me in the time zone that I am in, which is Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, Triceon says no sound. It happens. Yeah, and normally and I thought I looked down. I thought I saw it was all good to go. But yeah, it's one of them things where it happens. Triceon is good to see you. Thanks for joining us and being here with us today. I know you're one of our global friends, so I took into consideration where I'm like, well, we have so many different members here in the community are spread out all over the globe pretty much. So we're trying to find that ideal time to go live is an ongoing struggle. But again, I'm still toying with the idea of having two live shows, or one being a live show stream and the other being more of a podcast where we go a little bit more into we dive a little deeper into the conversation on what's going on currently in the world of tech. Something we normally don't do on the live shows because they are normally theme or topic centric. And this topic we're talking about, that's PSUs, power supply units. Explain what you should know before you buy, or in my opinion, what you should know before you buy. We're not going to go too deep into detail in terms of how much power you need on your vault rails, because with modern motherboards it's really not an issue. But just most importantly, three main attributes or features you want to look for in a power supply. But as those of you who are new to the show, or I mean, for those of you who are normal viewers, we got to do a little bit of house cleaning while we wait for some more friends and fam to join us. And this is also for my friends here, for my friends on the replay as well. If you did not know, we do have a mailing list here on the Inside the Lab channel. Unity does start with you. Most of all social media platform notifications, they're not that great. I mean, they're good, but notifications can get lost in noise real easily. So signing up for the mailing list will help you stay connected. I know most of you that come here frequently to the shows and engage on their videos, you are members of the mailing list, and I do appreciate those of you who have signed up. If you haven't yet, I welcome you to go ahead and sign up. It's totally free, and I promise not to send you any spam or junk email or what have you, and you're always welcome to unsubscribe should I deem unworthy of filling your email inbox. And then we have merch, right? There are some new designs. I'm not wearing any today. I got my Superman shirt going today. But you have our merch, right? Merch directly supports the channel. Merch is pretty self-explanatory. You can look good while you're playing, feel good while you're gaming, or creating content if that's what you do. There will be some new signature brands being added to the store. Some of them are coming in the mail, but shipping is taking forever, especially from Teespring and just everywhere. Like I tweeted about that too. Like shipping's just a hot mess right now. But check out the merch, right? Some awesome gear over there, both in soft lines and hard lines with the You Lift Me Up mug, which we have right here. And then last but not least, our website, which is an extension of the content. We can find updated content like from our blog and from some of my social media updates. If you're not following me yet, you can always come here and just get a snapshot of what's going on with our socials. And you can also contact me directly. Going to add more content to the website, more value more specifically. So do be sure to bounce in and out from there every once in a while. And you can find all of the links to those places down in the description box below. Triceon said, if you started at your normal time today, I wouldn't even be able to join in. Wow, yeah, I know you're, excuse me while I adjust the light here. We lost our backlight, and yeah, again, if things can go wrong, they will. But yeah, I mean, that's something I took into consideration and that's why I'm toying with the idea of having different times that I go live. Replays, and I understand and recognize that replays aren't always as viable because our live streams in typical fashion normally runs a little bit of ways, and I haven't started using timestamps yet. I will once our live streams become uh, more topic focused than they already are now. Excuse me. So, yeah. But we're going to jump right into the conversation. If you are here on the replay after the live stream has concluded, tell me down in the comment section below how far you made it, or if you have any questions about any of these things we're going to talk about. And if you're here on the live with me now, or you're joining in, we're talking about power supply units and how important they are and everything you should know either before going into getting your power supply, or you might have bought a system used from, a local seller or from offline. There's still important features that that you need to take into consideration when having a power supply unit, and those things may be unique to what you may need or what you may want to do with your system. So yeah, let's jump right into it. And again, if you have any questions, right? If you have any questions about any of the material we discussed, feel free to drop it in the chat here. And if you're here on a replay, do be sure to leave your questions down in the comment section below. I always come back and engage and interact with our replay viewers. Big shout out to our replay viewers, and big shout out to those of you who are here now and joining in. So let me start off with a full disclaimer, because I am not a certified electrician. This guide, if you will, or the contents of this live stream serves as a shopper's guide or buyer's guide to finding the right power supply unit for your desktop or for your PC. And now by right, I mean right by in terms of where you're not overspending and you're not underspending, right? Like you're not selling yourself short and skimping out on your power supply unit just because you think that it's not as important as, say, what CPU you may want to use, or what video card you may go with, or just platform in general. But I tell you what, let's jump over here to our image wall, because there are three things to take into consideration when shopping for a power supply unit or looking for a power supply unit in general. That's your wattage output, right? Like the maximum amount of power the PSU can output, right, as the name implies. Your efficiency rating, which is definitely important. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. And modularity, especially in modern times of PC gaming, with there being so many different cases and hardware configurations you can go with. There are different types of power supplies you can pick from and choose from. Now, these three things are three of maybe many, right? But these three are the most important. And even myself, when I am consulting clients, if they're wanting to build or upgrade their PC, or if I am shopping for hardware I may need myself to create content here on the channel. Now, wattage output, why is that important? Because should you go overkill here? And I know most of in the saying goes that with PC gaming, when's the best time to build a PC? And it's like a week later, right? Because there's never a right time to build a PC, and that's because hardware is always changing. So you may think you need to go overkill to protect yourself from the absence of your parts, and that's just not necessarily true. But how do you make the determination of when enough is enough in terms of wattage output? That's something we're going to dive deep here in this conversation, or in this discussion, in this live stream, most importantly. Damon Warren says, "What's good, peeps? It's good to see you, D. What's happening? D's in the house. Good. I watched your recent video where you unboxed the Insta360. Pretty good stuff. Pretty awesome stuff. Good to see you though, D. Welcome to our Saturday live stream that was rescheduled for Sunday. But here we are. We're a little earlier. Today's topic is pretty detailed, as we're talking about power supply units and a few features or qualities you should take into consideration when shopping or upgrading your power supply unit. That can be both new, and if you're on a little risky side like myself, and used as well, right? Like if you want to buy a used power supply unit. But wattage output is important. Efficiency rating, which is an industry standard for to 80 plus certification. You might have seen it on like stickers on power supply units, or from merchants or what have you. 80 plus is a certification, right? And it certifies the rating of the power supply unit, or how efficient the power supply unit is. That's something we're also going to talk about here in this live stream in great detail. So definitely be sure to stick around for that. But efficiency ratings, they have expanded beyond 80 plus. Like 80 plus is what the entry level point is, right? You have 80 plus, but this goes from least to the most efficient, starting from bronze all the way up to titanium. So you have bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and titanium. Platinum and titanium are generally used for, your very high capacity power supply units. They're normally used for workstation PCs and also servers, right? Because they generate a lot of heat and they require a lot of power. I see we have a few more peeps that showed in. Our XLRA Gaming says, "Word up, peeps. It's good to see you, fam. How you doing? Welcome to the live show. Welcome to the Saturday live stream." Right? That was flexed over to a Sunday live stream, and that's mostly because this topic is so detailed. I didn't really want to have it so late at night, right? Because we got to keep that energy flowing. We got a lot to talk about during this live stream. Also, I see we have Dirkko. My bad, fam. It's good to see you. He says, "Hey, hey." They say, "Hey, hey." Hey, hey to you too, fam. It's good to have you here on the live stream. Welcome to the show. I believe you're a first-time viewer, or we haven't met yet. Either way, it's good to see you here. Mrs. Zombified's in the house. It's good to see you too, Mrs. Zombified. Welcome to the live stream. We got a few regulars in the house. Awesome. I really do appreciate, you guys and gals, right? If there's any ladies in the house, I do appreciate you guys and gals coming out and hanging out with me during this live show. And while we also give I guess you could consider this a live training session, if you will, or Professor Lab. Professor Lab is on the mic because we're talking about power supply units and a few things you should know before buying or upgrading your power supply unit. For most of you who just joined in, again, welcome to the live stream, but you came in at the perfect time because we're just getting started. And we're talking about wattage output, efficiency rating, and modularity, and how each three of those are important factors you should take into consideration when shopping for a power supply unit. And we're going to go into detail about each of those three factors, right, and why they matter or why they are important. We were talking about efficiency rating. It was talking about how they start from the least to the most effective, all the way from bronze to titanium, right? And titanium and platinum, they're for workstation PCs or high-end servers, or for, dare I say it, mining rigs, which are, well, I stand corrected because most of the time mining GPUs, they're undervolted, so they can actually save power. But and then you have modularity. Modularity is often it's not as important depending on the form factor of your rig. If you're going standard ATX, then obviously a standard ATX power supply will be suitable for for your build. But if you're going small form factor, then you may need to go with this an SFX power supply unit. That way it can fit inside your case. Also knowing what having the right pin configurations, if it's if you have an 8-pin graphics card, if you have a 6-pin graphics card, if you have an 8-pin graphics card, and you don't want to get a 6-pin power supply unit. And we're going to talk about we're going to talk about some tools you can use if you're an inexperienced builder, if you're new here. I know most of you that are here on the chat now, and some of you that are even here subscribed to the channel, right? Because I've noticed there's some larger tech YouTubers that are subscribed to the channel here, so that's awesome too. But most of you are experienced builders, and some of this information you may or may not know. But if you do know a friend or fellow fan member, right? If you do know a friend or fellow fan member that can benefit from this information, do be sure to tweet out this link or share it out on your Facebook groups. Invite some friends over, because even here on the replay, there's going to be a tremendous amount of value being delivered in this live stream or during this live show, right? And now, obviously, again, those three things: wattage output, efficiency rating, modularity. Yes, they are important, but here's a bonus, I guess, and I won't even say it's necessarily a bonus. It's an absolute must, because knowing your CPU and your GPU's TDP is also an important factor when shopping for a power supply unit, right? And we're going to talk about what TDP is because there's a lot of, misconceptions about what TDP is, a lot of different opinions on what it means, how it's measured, what have you. But we're going to take a core of the information straight from the horse's mouth, and that's one of the chip manufacturers themselves, and that's Nvidia, right? But, you could find yourself, if you're here on a live stream, right? If you're here on a live stream and you get a chance, tell me down in the comment section now before we go ahead and talk about it more. But drop it down in the chat. Tell me what your power supply wattage is for your system that you're using. If you know it, do share it. I'm just curious. Is this something we're going to go back to a little bit towards the end of the live stream? But yeah, definitely. If you know your power supply, wattage and rating, please share it down in the chat. Okay. But you could find yourself in 3 of these situations, right? You're either building a new PC for yourself, or for a friend or for a fan member, and it's an inevitable part of the process. Like building, from conceptualizing the build to building it, like getting hands-on with it, and even benchmarking or overclocking if that's something you want to do. Like, me, Lab, I love overclocking. Like, overclocking is one of my favorite activities to partake in here, and with being a PC enthusiast. Man, I get so excited over it. I'm juggling words here like a circus clown. All right, XLR8 says EVGA 1000 watt G5 80 plus gold. Awesome. The Mrs. Zombified 850 watts. Okay, and Triceon says 750 watts gold. So yeah, and I know, and I have a firm idea of the components inside each 3 of your systems, and you guys have pretty high-end hardware. So yeah, that's awesome, and that's something we're going to talk about going further into this live stream. But again, you could find yourself in 3 of these predicaments, right? You're building a PC from scratch, and you have to research a power supply. You have to know what goes in it, or what will be compatible with the case, and what different connections you may need. Or do you need a 8-pin EPS cable with a supplemental 4-pin connection for overclocking your CPU or for more power to other components? Or you're upgrading your core components, that's your motherboard and your GPU, and you need more overhead for additional power draw. This is most of people I talk to don't really find themselves in category number 2. They're almost always in category number 1. But you'd be surprised to where, if someone got a pre-built system and say they want to update or upgrade their video card, they will indefinitely need to switch their power supply unit, more than likely. And that's something too we're going to talk about more, and that's getting power supply units from system integrators and from pre-built systems you may buy off Amazon. XLR8 Gaming says, and 3 8-pins are getting more popular for GPU nowadays. Yeah, absolutely, and especially with high-end RTX 30 series graphics cards like the 3090 and the 3080. It's insane. Like 3 8-pin connectors. That's incredible. I like to imagine the next generation of graphics cards will probably be more power friendly, as that'll be one of the buzzwords going into like 2021/2022 with 40 series graphics cards. The Mrs. Amify says Corsair RM 850X. Okay, yeah, that's a great power supply unit. I think I have a few of them I use here in the lab. One's not being used, but one is going to be used for a future project. I'm not going to talk about that a great deal, right? Just have to definitely keep a lookout for that. And if you're not yet subscribed, sorry, shameless plug here. And if you're not yet subscribed here, I definitely welcome you to get subscribed here on the channel. I know most of our fellow lab fam that's here on the live stream are. I know most of you, or I hope most of you, are subscribed yet. But if you're here on a if you're here on a replay and you're not yet subscribed, if you found this live stream, along your home feed or your, of your discovery feed, I definitely welcome you to subscribe. We do go live once a week with normal scheduled videos during the week. This week, I wasn't able to get our video out because I was waiting on a few parts to come in. More importantly, a lens for my DSLR camera, and that really held up the process, which it still hasn't came in. I just kind of had to go a different route, but we are on schedule for a normal Monday release. I can't wait to share that one with you. Sparta Rules 1993. Ants in the house. Okay, says, hey, what's up, brother? Sorry I was late. What did I miss? You didn't miss much, and I tell you what, it's better late than never, right? And you haven't really missed much. In fact, we're still on the first image scene where we're talking about power supply units and a few important qualities, features you should look into when buying a power supply unit. We talked about wattage output, efficiency rating, and modularity, what those three things are, and why, in a generalized sense, why they are important to the buying process. But you came in at a perfect time, Sparta Rules 1993, because we are getting ready to dive into each one of those categories and discuss why each of those three things are important. But before we do that, I was talking about how, whether you're here on the live stream or if you're here on the replay, you could find yourself in three predicaments or three situations. One, you're building a PC from scratch for yourself or for another friend of the fam. And so a power supply unit is an inevitable part of the process, right? Or you find yourself wanting to upgrade your core components, right? Like XLRA Gaming mentioned, 8-pin graphics cards are becoming more common. Well, chances are the power supply unit you're using now wouldn't be compatible with a 3 8-pin graphics card. So you would likely need to upgrade your PSU, or if you're going with a CPU with a higher power draw or a higher TDP, you may also need to upgrade your power supply unit to take advantage of a 4-pin supplementary socket or connection, or 3, which I hope this never happens to anybody, because this has got to be, a scary moment. You either go to turn your PC on and it turns on and shuts right back off, or even worse, it was working fine before, you left yesterday and you come back the next day and it ain't coming on, fam. But you might find yourself in the third predicament, which could happen to any one of us, right? All computer parts have a certain mileage. I do want to add here very early in the live stream, though, that power supply units have one of the best warranty models in all of consumer markets, really, in my honest opinion. And that's something we're going to talk about a little later down the live stream. So definitely, keep a lookout for that and hang around for that. But yeah, you can find yourself in that predicament where your power supply unit has failed. It's either in a pre-built system or it's in your current system. Maybe you didn't build your current system. Maybe you got it from a local system integrator, like myself. Believe it or not, I'm considered a local system integrator because I build PCs locally, and I did serve a few clients that were outside of my state and even a little, a couple of days away, and but I consider myself a system integrator as well. So maybe you got your PC from a system integrator. Maybe it's failed, right? You don't know what to do. If you can take it back to that integrator, that's perfect. But say if you bought it and had it shipped to you, that may be an option you're not willing to take, because chances are, even if you are covered, you're going to be without your system for quite a while, as you'll have to send it to them, then they have to send it back, and it could be a whole mess. Maybe you're not close to a micro center, right, where you can take it to them and have them do it for you, and it would be a little quicker. It's like taking your car to the mechanic at that point. But you can find yourself in either of those three predicaments. Now, for the sake of simplicity, and you're here on a live stream, right, you're here because you're looking for that value. You're looking for information that can help you should you find yourself either in those three categories. So I tell you what, let's start off with this. What are some qualities you should look for in a PSU, right? Now, the first part we talked about is, why does wattage matter, right? That's the first thing we talked about, and that was, why does wattage matter? Let me jump over to the chat because I see Mrs. Amplified shares a very good point, and he says, don't go cheap on PSUs. Absolutely. And like, I'm here to tell you, I'm not going to tell you a certain amount to spend on your power supply unit. Nope. I'm more so going to tell you that's going to depend on your needs and what your expected maximum system, what your maximum system wattage output is going to be. That is what should make your determining factor on how much you spend on your power supply unit. Now, obviously, a general rule of thumb, the more you spend, the better the quality you may get out of that product. And that could be true for power supply units, as most modern power supplies are they all come standard 80 plus, right? Some older ones, I believe, like 50 plus, which isn't very efficient in my honest opinion. And we're going to talk about why that is and how that is. But absolutely, you don't want to go cheap on the power supply unit either way. Like, it's one of them parts where, like, you may want that fast video card, or you may want that CPU with all them cores, right? All those cores. But your power supply unit is a integral part of the system, and it's one you shouldn't compromise your budget for just to put that money in other parts. It's actually kind of the exact opposite. In fact, when I'm consulting clients, I kind of start with, the base configuration. Like, it really starts with the CPU and GPU you're going with. Those two parts have the biggest impact on system draw and parts that generate heat, right? Your CPU and your GPU. So I start there, and then I get a firm idea of what the expected output or the expected wattage may be for that system. So, knowing your core parts, getting familiar with your core parts are equally just as important. Let me switch back here. Go back into the chat because I see Sparta Rules 1993 says always go big on the power supply. Yeah, I mean, you want to stick to what your expected what your expected power draw may be, or what your expected maximum wattage output may be. And we're going to talk about why that is most importantly. And XLRA Gaming says 10 years on my EVGA PSU. PSU tester, awesome for fellow local system integrators. Yeah, I have a PSU tester here inside of my my house of tools as well. They're very helpful because I do sometimes take a risk on used power supply units if I'm using them for myself, or if I'm comfortable in the condition. I'll check the power supply unit to make sure it's delivering like healthy currents to your motherboard, to the 24 pin cable and the 4 or 8 pin EPS CPU cable. But yeah, EVGA and Corsair are my personal go-tos for power supplies. And the warranty, especially on EVGA's warranty is almost unrivaled, really, in terms of how far it can take you, in terms of how long you may own it. But a good rule of thumb to be at is 25% headroom of your expected outage, of your expected wattage of your CPU, right? How much do you expect your system to output? Now let's for sakes of simplicity, right? Because math, I mean, we need math in our everyday lives, right? But nobody really loves math unless you're a math fan. That's all good to you too. But math is what it is. But let's say you have a system, right? Just a normal system. Your base, your expected or estimated maximum wattage is about 400 watts, right? Let's say it's about 400 watts. That's pretty modest, especially if you don't plan on doing any overclocking. I mean, that's maybe a 9700K, an i7 9700K, and I chose Intel for a reason, which we're also going to talk about. But that's like an i7 9700K and an RTX 3070. Believe it or not, that's somewhere about that range, and that's without any overclocking. But if your expected or your estimated maximum wattage is about 400 watts, then a 550 to 600 watt power supply unit will be more than enough power to run your system. Now, like Sparta Rule says, you want to go big on your power supply unit, and here's why that's true, but not very efficient, because wattage matters. And before we go into it, let me start with the precursor and tell you that efficiency is just as equal important. And that's because if your power supply unit, say, let me use the example of the 50, let's say your power supply unit has a 50% rating, right? So that means let's say your 500 watt power supply unit with a 50%, what is it? 50% efficiency. Man, sorry, I lost track of it. Let's say a power supply unit with a 50% efficiency. It's going to draw up to 1,000 watts from the wall, to be able to achieve that maximum out, to be able to hit that maximum outage or wattage. So the rest, that other 500 watts, it's lost in heat. It's just dissipated into your case, into other components. Now, that's why you necessarily don't want to overspin. You want to give yourself enough headroom and affordability to upgrade or even to overclock. Now, I chose Intel because Intel doesn't necessarily list their TDPs accurately. Their TDPs are based off of the base clock frequency of their CPUs, not their boost clock frequency, which will almost indefinitely boost. If you have like a K-based CPU and you have adequate cooling, the CPU will definitely try to hit its targeted boost clock frequency, which will then add more heat and more power. So, Intel's TDP, it's not accurate. And that's one of the main reasons why TDP can't be a substitute for power draw, right? Because you have to take into consideration, even with GPUs, a graphics card at 100% load, that is a GPU. That's a part that's under 100% load. Let's say, for example, this RTX 2080, I think has a TDP of, let's say it's 250 watts, somewhere around there. But it has a max, let's say the thermal max, let's say it can hit 94 C. I believe it's 94 degrees C. So 94 degrees C, it's going to generate about 200 watts of power. Okay, the hotter it gets, the more power it gets. But the chip can only hit a certain temperature before it'll stop functioning, and that's the hottest it can get. That's the maximum amount of power it can draw before it goes critical, right? Nobody wants their chips to go critical. Let me jump over to the chat. I see XLR Gaming says, isn't the advertised power rating depending on PSU cooling? How many use 0 RPM mode? It always worries me. Again, most power supply units, to my understanding, that use 0 RPM is because they are, like, if you look at here in our example, the 750 watt G3 power supply unit here has a 50 degrees C ambient at full load. That's actually pretty good. That tells me that the fan really won't kick in until this power supply, depending on the load. And this is why power supply unit manufacturers, they necessarily can't give you an accurate of how efficient the power supply is going to be. It's like it's an average. They say it's 80 plus gold, right? That could be what, 82%, right? But your power supply going 0 RPM, I would say, depending on what you're doing, if your system is idle, if you're browsing the internet, or if you're on your computer now and you're here with me on this live stream, right? Which I do appreciate you being here. But you're here with me on this live stream. Your power supply doesn't need to consume a lot of power. But let's say, you're gaming, you're gaming at high resolution, say 1440p. So your graphics card's working really hard. Maybe you're streaming too. So your CPU, maybe you're streaming on your CPU. Your CPU's also working extra hard. So all these extra parts are generated. Now your power supply, depending on how it's rated, will try to draw as much power from your wall that is required under that load. And that could be different for each one of us. If you're overclocking, overclocking plays an even bigger role. Why? Because you're introducing more power. More power generates more heat, right? And that's like an enemy of overclocking, right? Heat is generally the enemy of overclocking, because you want your clock speed, rather that's on your GPU or your CPU. You want that clock speed to you want to be able to sustain that clock speed. Like, you don't want any fluctuations due to temperature spikes, right? So you're right, XLR Gaming. Cooling is dependent on how much power you may need, depending on what you're doing, right? And Damon says, wow, tricky. I mean, power supply units, and this is why, again, I push the live stream back to make it a little early, because power supplies, they can be tricky. And I do want to talk more about TDP, because I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, much like with what XLR Gaming was saying about advertised power rating depending on PSU cooling, because it's also depending on the cooling of the parts that are drawing the power. That's also important too. Your CPU and your GPU being two of the biggest factors, right? Two of the biggest factors. If your CPU is cooled, say on a moderate air cooler, say like a Hyper 212, right? A Cooler Master Hyper 212 versus say a 240 millimeter AIO. Clearly, your CPU is going to be able to boost higher for longer because it's not running into any temperature overhead limitations, right? Versus a air cooler, water transfers heat more efficiently than air. So with an air cooler, you're kind of cycling that air right back inside the case, so your CPU may not be able to boost as high. Same thing applies with your graphics card, and graphics cards especially, like depending on the type of graphics card you use, whether that's a blower style or if that's a standard, two axial fan cooler, which most of us have, or even if you took it to the next level and you water cool your graphics card, like kudos to you because water is a PC's best friend, believe it or not, contrary to the belief. But yeah, I tell you what, let's jump right into TDP because TDP does play an important role, right? Now, how does TDP play a role? Well, like I just mentioned, when you're take into consideration how much power you may need for what you're doing, even if it's a casual gaming sesh, and you're playing some Cyberpunk 2077. Bad example. I don't know if anybody's playing. Let me know if you're here on the chat, or even if you're here on the replay and you're still playing some Cyberpunk 2077. I know the recent patch came out. Maybe we'll revisit it in an upcoming live stream. We'll see. Maybe like a pop-up live stream. We'll revisit patch number, I think it's 1.1, I believe the patch is. But maybe you're playing some Cyberpunk, maybe you're playing some Apex, Fortnite, what have you. Maybe you're just, watching some YouTube like you are here now. TDP plays a role because the hotter the CPU gets, or hotter your GPU gets, the more power it's going to generate, right? Like that's just the truth behind how power is regulated from your wall to your computer, and that is essentially the role the power supply plays. XLR Gaming says I overclocked 3090 and overclocked i9. I need all the power. Yeah, I imagine so. And I can't wait to get my hands. I know you saw here. Most of you that were here on live stream were here for the live unboxing we did with the Asus ROG Strix RTX 3090. I did finish up the unboxing video. That was fun. So do be sure I believe that's going to hit your sub boxes tomorrow, right? About 12. Let me switch back here. That should drop around tomorrow, around noon time. What we call noon time. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But an overclocked 3090 and an i9, yeah, absolutely. I mean, overclocking any Intel CPU, you most definitely want to do it on an AIO. And I'm being a little redundant here because I don't recommend any overclocking on air. Like I just really don't. Like just let your CPU boost up to its maximum, what's available in terms of cooling and overhead. AVX Rim plays. I believe you're new here to the live stream. Welcome to the live show. Our weekly live streams are normally on a Saturday. They're normally a little later here, about 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, as I am here stateside. But we're experimenting here a little bit. We flexed it over into a Sunday because of how tricky and how confusing this topic can be at times. And we're coming up on one of the most confusing topics, and that's how TDP plays a role. But I see you say, hi, I'm a fan. Can the GTX 1650 play Red Dead Redemption 2? Well, first of all, AVX, I definitely appreciate you being a member here in our community, right? Being a member of the Lab Fam community here. And yes, the 1650 it can play Red Dead Redemption 2. You may have to reduce the graphics settings because the game is also a little bit CPU bound. There are a lot of most Rockstar games most open world simulation games are, like even Cyberpunk 2077. I mean, I know it's hard to take into to take CDPR's word at face value, but originally CDPR had announced that Cyberpunk 2077 was both GPU bound and CPU bound with a special asterisk in all bold. So, but yeah, I mean that could also depend on the CPU you're gonna pair or you have paired with your 1650. AVX, do let us know your system specs, what you're rocking. But yeah, 1650 can play Red Dead Redemption 2. I did a review on the 1650 Super playing some games, you can find, I mean, don't go watch it now. Do it at the end of this live show. Do it at the end of the live stream. But you can find the 1650 Super review in our most recent live stream, or not most recent playlist, down in the description box, aka the basement, right? I see we got D's been saying, calling the description box the basement over in his videos. Come on, fam, guys, come on, get on with the board. If you're a content creator, jump on board. Call the description box the basement. Because if you're like a 90s baby or something like that, 80s baby, we all have fun down in the basement, right? The Genesis was down there, the Super Nintendo was down there, the Dreamcast was down there, all those good things. Like AVX says, thanks, you're certainly welcome. You're certainly welcome, AVX. And AVX says, I got a Ryzen 5 3600 6-core 12-thread Zen 2 CPU with 16 gigabytes RAM at 3200 megahertz. I mean, absolutely, your system will be able to play Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm going to take a jab and say that's at 1080p. And if that's at 1080p, try to mess around with your graphic settings, especially ones that are based off like simulation based features, like any kind of volumetric settings and shadows and things like that. And try to push some of that load onto your 1650 Super while also trying to balance the load between your GPU. D says it's in the basement. Absolutely, it's all in the basement, man. Like the Big Ticket Show. I don't know if you remember that. The Big Ticket Show used to come on TV, man. Big Ticket Show was pretty cool. If you're here on the live stream, you're in the replay, let me know if you remember the Big Ticket Show, right? Where he was in the basement. Give me a yes or a no in the comment sections or the chat. But I tell you what, let's go back here because we're talking about how TDP plays a role when shopping for a power supply unit. And let me correct myself and say it's just not important for shopping for a power supply unit. It's important when shopping for your system in general. Like XLR8 mentioned, he overclocks his RTX 3090 and his i9, I believe it's a 10900K or 9900K. Either way, if you are interested in overclocking your parts before you even buy them, then knowing that parts or that component's TDP is even more important. Arguably, before pulling the trigger on the power supply unit, you have to have a general idea. Now, yes, tools like PC Part Picker gives you an estimated wattage, and it is helpful. But you're going to hear me say this multiple times. Do remember that it's just an estimate, right? Even Newegg's PSU calculator, which is another popular, I believe there's one more. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's one more. I know Newegg has one. Even Newegg's is just an estimate because Newegg doesn't know what you intend to do with your system. This is why no manufacturer can say indefinitely, like, hey, this power supply, yeah, you're going to be able to hit 500 watts max, depending on what you put inside of it. I mean, it's very vague and very ambiguous. It really depends on you or the system integrator knowing the parts, knowing what's going inside of the system. Now, TDP, how does it play a role? Well, for starters, let's talk about what TDP even means or what it is, because the definition is like opinions. Everybody's got a different one, quite literally. Even I don't like to argue much. Like, if you see me here on the channel and you may come across a conversation on the threads, me personally, I don't like to argue. I think it's a waste of both parties' time to argue about something that they disagree on, especially when it can't be proven or disproven with facts. So I don't really argue, but TDP has, the definition is like opinions. Everybody's got a different one, but the most commonly used term, and they all mean the same thing, but you have thermal design point, right? And that's the most commonly used, or that's the most thermal design power. I'm sorry, is the most commonly used vernacular, right? Thermal design power or parameter. Sorry, depends. It really depends on who you're talking to, but they all mean the same thing, and it's just the measurement of the maximum amount of heat a CPU or GPU generates under a workload. That workload, again, you could be rendering a video. Depending on the encoder you're using, you could either be encoding that video on your GPU and or your CPU, or you could be doing some high-end 3D rendering. Those are all loads, and the hotter your part gets, or the hotter the component gets, the more power it's going to generate, right? So that's TDP. Again, the measurement, the maximum amount of heat a CPU or GPU generates under a workload. Gaming puts your GPU under a 100% workload. If you notice, if you track your stats using MSI Afterburner, like XLR gaming overclocks, and anybody else, if you overclock, that's awesome. Tell me down in the comment section if you overclock. Something I want to do more, like overclock, especially older hardware, to try to get as much performance out of it that you wouldn't expect otherwise, especially if you can control limiting factors like cooling, right? Always go with the AIO. I want to do some extreme overclocking here and some future content where, I mean, we bring the chiller out. We go big tech, right? We do like some of the big tech tubers are doing. We bring the chiller out. We bring the ice bucket out. I have an RTX 3090. I will possibly need to platform switch if I want to get on the top 100 on Firestrike. I believe it's next to near improbable, but anything's possible. But yeah, let me go back over to the chat and get caught up in the chat, because I see AVX says they have a 144 Hz 1080p monitor and a 450 watt power supply unit. Okay. Yeah, see, I mean, I think the 3600 has a TDP of 95 watts, I believe, and AMD is normally more accurate with their ratings. I believe the 3600 has a TDP of like 95 watts, and the 1650, I'm not sure if you have the super variant or not, but the 1650 has like a max power draw of 90 watts, I believe. So even with the 450 watt power supply, you have a decent amount of overhead to even let GPU boost the graphics card up, should you have adequate cooling in your case to even, just to eke out even a little bit more performance. XLR Gaming says i9 9900K 5.1 gigahertz all cores. Never heard of big ticket show. Okay, I'm not sure if I got the last reference. I do apologize, but that's actually pretty. That's about a good place to be on a 9900K. For my 9900K, I hope to maybe shoot for 5.1, maybe 5.2, depending on what I go with in terms of what I go with a cooler. But yeah, awesome stuff. But now that we know what TDP means, okay, let's talk about how how it's important, why it's important, because we talked about that the harder your PC runs, the more heat it'll generate, and components use electricity, much like your cell phone, my cell phone, your cell phone. Cell phones are miniature computers, if you will. They have processors, they have onboard RAM. Some of them have dedicated video cards inside of them. They are miniature computers. So are tablets, right? It's more concerning that cell phones cost more than a console. Excuse me. The Xbox Series SX and PS5 notwithstanding, but here and before the advent of these newer consoles, PS4 I believe was going for $399, and the same thing with the Xbox One, $499. So iPhones were releasing for twice as much as that. Right, but cell phones, they generate heat too. I'm sorry. And if you've been playing a game like an intense graphic game, say like Brawl Stars, or I play Clash of Clans, but if you're playing a game for an extended period on your phone, the back of your phone will get hot, right by the battery. It's by the battery. Why is that? The battery is what's providing power to your components. So the longer you're on your phone playing the game, the harder your battery has to work, the more heat that's going to be generated. So yeah, TDP even applies on a phone, because phones have a certain heat, a certain temperature they can reach before they shut down. I remember when I had an iPhone, I can't remember which one, so I'm not sure if this is still, somebody could correct me here in the chat. I'm not sure if this is still applicable now, but I had an iPhone, I believe it was a 7 or 7 Plus, I believe. And I would sometimes leave it in the car or throw it on the dash and really forgot about it. And sometimes I would come back and the phone would be so hot, I would have to wait for it to cool down before I could use it. And so, yeah. AVX says, also, this is my first PC build, and I can't figure out the cabling. Okay. What specific issue that you're having with your cables? Is it the the input-output connections from like your case to your motherboard, to the bottom of your motherboard? Is that with the 24-pin cable, your PCIe, your CPU cable? Let us know. Maybe we can help you out. And AVX asks, do we have a Discord server. So that's something we talked about in our New Year's Eve live stream. A Discord server is coming. It is planned for the first quarter here of the 2021 calendar quarter, if you will. So between now and about March, or yeah, about between now and March, our Discord server will go launch. AVX, if you're not yet subscribed to our email list, let me switch back here. If you're not yet subscribed to our email list, I do welcome you to do that because those of you who are signed up on the email list are going to get first notification on signing up for the Discord link before the Discord closes to non-grandfathered members, and it's only going to be open back up for future channel members, or if you whatever platform we go with for doing channel memberships, it'll be one of the paywalls to join. So AVX says the case and the SSD. So again, like, what specifically with the case what's your roadblock? Like, what specifically are you running into? What problem are you having in your SSD? You have your SATA cable, and then you have your you have your SATA connection from your power supply unit. Both those go inside your SSD. And are these new parts? Do let us know as we mosey on through here the conversation. And I see AVX says, I'm sub to the channel, but I don't know how to sign up to the list. So you should see a link to the list down in the comment section. It should be a pinned comment on this video, but if you go to it now, it's going to, you'll leave the show. So check out that link after the show. And also, if you don't see it there, which it should be there, but by chance, if you don't see it there, you can also check out the description box, aka the basement, right? So you've been warned, AVX. If you hear us say the basement, that's the description box, but both of them are there. And then you see the SATA cable won't fit. These are new parts. Okay, so yeah, definitely follow me on Instagram, right? If you're on Instagram or Twitter, follow me at Inside the Lab YT, and I will do my best to help you with that issue. As I may need a little bit more context to help you out, but I'll be more than willing to help you out. D says, looking forward to it. The list is in the basement. Yes, that's right. The list is in the basement. And let me jump back over here, back to the topic on hand and how we're talking about TDP, because some members here, some people in the PC community, and that's either larger tech channels way bigger than myself, they usually refer to TDP as the maximum amount of power a component can use. And that too is true. NVIDIA themselves says that it's both, but in general terms, TDP means the amount of heat a component generates, and cooling components must remove. See, XLR8 made it a very valid point about heat playing a role on how much power you may need for your power supply unit, because there's other parts that have to work to maintain the heat inside of your case. Let's say we're talking about a closed configuration here, a normal case with, a side panel. If you're using tempered glass, like I like to use tempered glass, that it especially gets, especially gets heated in a tempered glass case. But yeah, I mean, TDP is, to a certain extent, the components, it's the amount of heat components generate, and cooling components must be removed. Now, TDP is often a way to measure the system's power draw because they end up being close. But like we talked about earlier in the live stream, that's not always the case, right? Again, with our Intel example, with Intel not listing their TDPs accurately, and they base it off of the base clock speed. But if you have a non-K Intel CPU like a 7500, and it'll only boost up to a certain amount, like there is no amount it can go further. Like the clock speed, I believe, is 7500 for 3400 megahertz, 3.4 gigahertz is what it'll top out. So no amount of cooling is going to help you break that threshold. Like the CPU has a bin TDP that will only let it get so hot to reach that, clock speed and no further. But this is why you shouldn't only use TDP to decide the size of your power supply unit. If you're using an overclockable chip like an Intel, all AMD CPUs can boost to you can overclock them manually, but they still very much use PBO 2.0 and or precision boost overdrive, and that will allow the CPU to boost to the highest possible clock speed or frequency that the cooling overhead allows. So again, AMD is more, and again, AMD is more realistic with their TDP ratings, but Intel's a little bit more shaky, right? Like, even if you don't want to overclock, let's say for example you want to go with a 9700K, I believe a 9700K boosts all the way up to 4.7 gigahertz or 4700 megahertz. So if the 9700K's TDP might be listed at 125 watts, that's it running at a base frequency of maybe 3.7 gigahertz. Most modern CPUs run at a base frequency of about 3.7 gigahertz or 3.8 gigahertz. I believe 9700K might run at 4.2 gigahertz, but I could be wrong. Could be wrong. But yeah, Intel's is a little bit, is a little lower than what most users experience, but it's usually achieved by default giving adequate cooling. Like, if your CPU can boost that high, it will, right? Especially on a K-based CPU. It's very important, very important. And it really goes back to when you're overclocking, what you're doing or running. Even if you're overclocking your graphics card, you're running the component past its manufacturer's specifications, right? This is why some people get concerned, like, oh, I overclock, am I going to, ruin my warranty? Chances are you may, depending on if you're not careful. And by not careful, I mean not knowledgeable about what you're doing. I highly recommend that if you want to overclock your graphics card or your CPU, watch a couple videos. I have some here on the channel. They're kind of blended because overclocking isn't as popular in the community because of the risk versus reward. Some people don't think it's really worth it. I say depending on the game and depending on what you're doing, overclocking your CPU normally gives the fastest results, especially with like speeding up render times on encoding video. So yeah, but all right, why does efficiency matter? Because we're done with TDP, right? The measurement of the maximum amount of heat a CPU generates under workload. But for the last part, the last point that's just as important, and that's efficiency. And now, why and how does efficiency matter? You may be conscious about your power bill, and you may not be. But aside from introducing more, adding more dollar amounts to your power bill, like I talked about in the beginning of this live stream, there's also an amount of heat that's going to be wasted and any additional power that the power supply might be trying to draw from the wall. That heat does very much go back inside your case. Now, when I'm building, you may have noticed I put the power supply unit upside down. It may look incorrect, but it's good practice to have your power supply, exhaust the air down and outside of the case, as opposed to bouncing heat back and forth, or your GPU cycling up hot air, right, and pushing it back onto your fin array, or even your CPU if it's an air cooler, or even if on your radiator if you're using an AIO, same thing applies. But our example that we used earlier, where I said if you have a 500 watt power supply with a 50% efficiency rating, it would draw 1,000 watts from the wall to get that peak output. The other 500 watts is wasted in heat conversion. This is why going big isn't necessarily a good idea. Again, even if you are not conscious on your power bill, or if you don't really, like, you say, oh well, my power is what it is. But then you can't ignore the introductory of added heat, because that can degrade your power supply. Or I'm sorry, it can degrade your power supply, right? But it can also degrade your other parts, right? Because heat is any component's worst enemy, right? Like heat is just detrimental. But I love heat. I don't like being cold. But computer parts don't like heat, right? And they generate heat, so it's a love-hate relationship. This is why cooling is so important. Like, it's okay to go with a stock cooler. I know you, just like in the best $900 gaming PC to build in 2021, that video, which if you're interested, you can find that link down in the basement below. You can watch that video out after checking out this live stream. It's a great watch. It really is one of my favorites to produce so far going into 2021. But that build used the standard stock cooler that came with the CPU, and I believe it's a 65 watt cooler. So it'll be able to dissipate heat around that power draw, right? And I believe the 2600X has a low power draw. Damon says, or UGP says, good morning, everyone. What's up, UGP? Good to see you here on the live stream. That's right, over in California. We got another Cali folk here on the live stream. And it is morning there. Interesting stuff. And I know we had another member here, Tricion, who's like, I believe Switzerland. I believe it's late there. It's like really late there right now. D says, Avalish says, good morning. Good morning to you as well. D says, good point. Never knew to face air down. Yeah, absolutely. And now most modern power supply units, they have their labels inverted, as this has become a common practice. So as to have the label look right side up, it'll have the label on both sides, one facing down and one facing up. So should that bother you, it's at least oriented in the right position once you face your power supply unit down. But it's something I've been doing here for the longest time. UGP says my electric bill was $559 in December, and I'm in LA and Cali. My MacBook Air overheats when I edit using my Mac. Wow, I mean that is a high electric bill, and I know Californians have that issue from my understanding, like from what I've read and from some of the conversations I've had from a few people that live over on that side. But your MacBook, Paula, getting hot. I'm going to say you probably use it plugged in, right? Like let us know if you use it plugged in, like if you use it plugged in. If you do, that could probably be one of the reasons why. I mean, it's laptops in general. It's like if you're going to do any kind of heavy, intense workloads on a laptop, you probably should look at some kind of aftermarket cooling, like a plate or something below, and definitely try to keep the laptop lifted. But I think MacBooks don't have don't have vents underneath. So it's a little tricky. I mean, Macs are always tricky because there's not really much you can do there, other than maybe try to control how much power you're using. Say turn down the brightness, turn off any other features you don't need, close any other applications that you may have running in the background. You may be using anything that's going to require your MacBook, which is still very much a computer with its custom Apple parts for the most part. But yeah, try to limit what you're doing. So if you're working on a video, Paula, because I know you're a creator here in the community, but if you're working on a video or you're working on a thumbnail, try to stick to that program, close everything else, and just kind of limit the amount of power your laptop is required to do those tasks, because your laptop is getting hot because it's doing a lot, so it's requiring a lot of constant power. And laptops, unfortunately, they don't use, they use batteries to keep to circulate their power. The power supply charges the battery. And Uber Girl Paula says, but sometimes I unplug it. Yeah, I mean, I guess, and I'm going to go on a limb and say that probably depends on what you're doing, that you may unplug or leave it plugged to to work out your content workflow. Yeah, UGB says I do that. I think the spirit in my house drains my electronic devices. Wow. Well, tell the spirit do what I do. Tell them go to bed. That's what I say. I say go to bed. Leave me alone. But yeah, all good stuff. I do appreciate, UGP D Avalish says good morning. I do appreciate you guys joining in and adding to the conversation. And if you're here on the live stream, and if you just joined us, do tell us where you're watching from. I know most of you where you are. I know we got a couple people here, a couple folks that are repping Cali, a couple global friends all around. But I see we got quite a few people. So yeah, tell me down in the chat where you're watching from. What time zone you're in, what's going on in your neck of the world, all that good stuff. XLR Gaming says fans down, pull air under the case for me. Nice. And what case are you using? XLR Gaming. I'm not sure what your main chassis is. I'm not sure if you shared it with us. I do apologize if you have before though. AVX Run Play says I'm Australian and the PC parts are so much in Australia. Yes, one of my favorite larger tech tubers, Brian over at Tech Yes City, he's Australian. That's something I watch in his content, and when we're talking off platform, because I do talk to Brian, when we're talking off platform, it's something we talk about, and that's how prices, like Australian parts, especially on GPUs, are extremely high. And it's normally when we're having our talk about, going on used PC parts hunts. And AVX says, but it was $1,300 for my PC build. My specs are Ryzen 5 3600 GTX 1650 Super, 450 watt PSU, deep cool matrix 50 PC case, 16 gigabytes RAM, and a 480 gigabyte SSD. Yeah, I mean that's crazy, and that's about $200 to $300 more than what that system should probably run you. It's very close to the best gaming PC to build under $900 in 2021 video that you keep hearing me reference to. Again, shameless plug. You can check that video out after the live stream concludes. It's a really good watch. Okay, it's one of my favorites to produce. But that build with a 1660 Ti came to about $839 which, like, the 1660 Ti has an MSRP at $279. We're not even going to talk about MS. Let me switch back here because we're not even going to talk about MSRP. We know what scalpers and global shortages on GDDR6 memory modules, we know what it's doing to MSRPs. So I'm not going to talk about MSRPs. Great deal. I'm not going to go on a rant. I've tried to rant. I think I'm incapable of doing it. We'll see. Maybe I haven't run across any situation that's, struck a nerve that would cause me to get in front of the camera and rant. But the 1660 Ti we used for that video was still about $60 over MSRP, and even for that, I believe it was Asus Tough variant, it's still very much $279 at MSRP, but I believe it ended up costing us $339, which a little more coming into tax and other things, but still a little more than what we cost, and so it put us over the initial targeted budget, which was $800. But that's why the video is more so targeted to under $900 gaming PC, because GPU MSRPs are just so tricky and just constantly fluctuating right now. UGP says, seriously, I go to sleep with the iPhone fully charged, and in the AM, it's dead. Wow. I mean, you might want to start charging that. You might start charging that entity some finder's fees, or maybe some RENT. AVX says, in my country, it's 8 a.m. Awesome. Tell us where you're at. Tell us what country you're at. Tell us where you're from, man. I love talking and networking to people all over the world. It's one of the amazing things about the internet. It can be a gift and a curse too. I see Sparta Rules says Stockton, California. Yeah, I know Sparta Rules is Cali fam. And D says Wilmington, Delaware. It's actually where I grew up, right? My neck of the woods. I am a Maryland resident, but okay, let me put it this way. A little bit of lab history. I was born in Virginia, United States, but moved to Maryland, or moved to Delaware when I was like 4. And essentially, Wilmington, Delaware made me, like, my alma mater, my high school, William Penn High School, if you're here on the chat. That's where I went to high school, William Penn High School. UGP is welcoming all the friends, saying, hey there, friends, with the thumbs up. And XLR Gaming says it's a Mac, just throw it out. Just throw it out, buy another. JK, look into a cooling pad and blow it out with canned air, or get it repasted. If you're talking about a Mac, I can believe that'd probably be a little costly, but if you're by a local repair center, I imagine definitely an option, right? UGP says, LOL, I'm planning on buying the new S21 Ultra phone instead. That's an amazing smartphone. I used to be really I used to geek out with cell phones and mobile, to the point to where when I wanted to create a channel, it was going to be on cell phones and things like that. But I just kind of like reading about them. I didn't want to create content behind them. It wasn't that interesting to me. But the S21 Ultra, wow. Very powerful phone, but great for content creators, which is good to see. Cell phone manufacturers are taking into consideration that people aren't just playing Candy Crush and browsing Facebook with their mobile devices now, and nobody wants to pay $1,000 or $1,200 for a device just to scroll on Facebook. You can do that on a $100 phone, right? So it's good to see cell phone manufacturers are actually adding features that are helpful to what most people are doing in today's world, and that's taking pictures, editing videos on the go, or if you're a mobile content creator, or if you take your content creation workflow on the go, having a cell phone as a companion tool can be really helpful. AVX says the 1660 Ti is $400 AUD in Australia. Man, that is the cheapest 1660 Ti. XLR Gamer says I use a Fantex P600S. Houston, Texas in the house. Okay. All right, Texas. I love it. You gotta love Texas, man. You gotta love Texans. The Mrs. Amify says retail market sucks right now. I'm waiting. I'm with you, and I talk about that in tomorrow's upload in Monday's video. Like I talk about, why. I mean, it's no secret. I went with the RTX 3090, but I kind of talk about why I went with the RTX 3090. Like why did I settle up on that? And it really does, because the retail market it's a little bit shambles. Like it's kind of forcing your hand on certain purchases because you don't want to overspend for a certain part, like, or a certain component. And if you in that territory of overspending for it, then you might just want to considering upgrading the tier, right? If you're looking for a 3080 and that's what you want, like a 3080, you're not going to find it at MSRP, right? Chances are you're not. Chances are you might find a little scalp. By little, I'm talking about like 30-40%. But at that point, you're in the territory of either a 6900 XT or even a, excuse me, dare I say it, an RTX 3090, right? Now the Asus ROG Strix RTX 3090, I paid MSRP for it. It's still very much an expensive graphics card. And I love Fantex cases. My first modern PC case was the Fantex P400S. Great case. AVX says, and that's refurbished. Wow, that is high for the refurbished part. And UGP says, I'm so over this Apple ecosystem. Yeah, I used to be heavy when I developed indie games for Windows. I was heavy in the Apple ecosystem. And when I left it, I felt like the chains were broken. Man, like it just opened up a whole new possibility. But I was heavy in the Apple ecosystem when we were developing indie games using Unity. AVX says, yeah, brand new, it's $500 AUD, still high. UGP says, love Los Angeles, but I'm originally from Glasgow in Scotland. Awesome. Okay. Little Scott in the house. And AVX says, how much is the 1660 Ti in your country? I know there's a little delay, and I'm a little behind on the chat here, so I'm trying to catch up. But the 1660 Ti, we could check, but it has an MSRP of $279, but I've seen it as high as $400 now. And even when I've responded to comments under that video where we use the 1660 Ti, and a lot of people telling me, oh, this graphics card is $600 now, or it's $400 now. And I'm like, yeah, the GPU prices are a constant fluctuation because there's just not enough supply to meet the demands right now. And so everything has gone up. UGP says the S20 Samsung was a flop. Okay. And AVX says in Australia where I live, the 60 Ti is $500 brand new. UGP says I use both an iPhone 11 Pro and also my S9. I like Google. Like I use a Pixel, right? Like I do have my eyes on a Pixel 5, just because now, quite naturally, I've traded one ecosystem for the other. Now I'm in Google's ecosystem quite heavily, from obviously being on YouTube and everything else and all their other tools. But I do like using a Pixel and being baked heavily within the Android sub ecosystem, if you will. But I do like using a Note. As I see Damon says, I started creating on a Note 10. Yeah, I love the Note. When I had my Note, it's one of my favorite phones. UGP says phones are great for content creators. Yeah, it's like one of the higher upper echelon of creators. My guy D Niman, Nick's brother, right? Many of you familiar with that name. D is a big advocate of mobile creation, and again, cell phones going in this modern route of being able to fulfill the needs of beyond just, well, I want to go on Facebook, or I want to scroll to Twitter, or I play Candy Crush. Which, if you do those things, that's fine. But cell phones now are coming out with additional improvements that really can help you take your content creation flow to the next level, even if you want to stay a dedicated mobile content creation flow. But I digress, because we'll talk about that more a little later, right? Like content creation workflow, maybe in a pop-up live stream, if that's something you're interested in. Like if you create content and you have any questions about how some of the things I go, some secrets I'll share, right? It's all fun. And yeah, UGB says phones are great for content. You should have all invested in cryptocurrency. I see cryptocurrency is coming through in a big way. And Damon says now I use an iPad, always on the move. Yeah, if I went on the move, I'd probably use an iPad Mini, like a newer iPad Mini, because I have big hands, so I need like a lot of screen real estate space. And I still want something that's comfortable to hold too, you know, especially for that reason, right? And AVX says whoa. He's saying whoa too. EGB says inflation is going to get worse. And AVX says even in the 2060 and in Australia, even in the 2060, even in Australia, a 2060 is 750 AUD. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean that's insane. It's hard. It's like you would think that the Australian used market would be a better alternative to buying new. But from following some of Brian's content, and I followed Brian's content before I had, got into content creation myself, it's not always that's not always necessarily the case. So people don't flex their prices or finesse their prices to make it a better alternative to buying new. They just kind of still inflate the prices because they can. I mean, it's supply and demand, right? It's that old adage of supply and demand. UGP says I still have my Note 4, which just died recently. The camera was still amazing. I believe that's what I had. The Note 4 was the last Note the last Samsung Note I ended up using, but one of my favorites to date. Sparta says I'm also hating cryptocurrency because of the GPU market. Yeah, with most PC enthusiasts, it's a love-hate with miners because they are usually the culprit, or cryptocurrency miners are usually the culprits for low GPU stock or for GPU inflated prices. But so in my opinion, it's a love-hate relationship, and definitely because really it all goes back to the GPU manufacturers, right? It's on them to meet the demand of their consumers, right, with their products, right? It's up to them to meet the supply with the demand, even if that is miners, or even if that's most of us casuals wanting to buy a GPU to upgrade, right, to unlock more frames or to upgrade our resolution we play at. And UGP says, remember to smash that like button, everybody. Yes, definitely. I don't know if we're going to sing or rap. For most of you who weren't on a couple of past live streams, right? If you weren't here for the New Year's Eve live stream, man, that was a fun time. Like I know Damon was here. I know XLR was here. I know Sparta Rules was here. I know some of you are here for the live stream, for the New Year's Eve live stream, and man, that was fun. I really had a great time during that live stream. I look forward to doing the one in the 2021. Right? Because we're still going to be rocking and rolling. And yeah, definitely hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet, because plenty of more content coming out between the whole new year. But XLR8 Gaming says on cell phones, I love my OnePlus 8 5G, first OnePlus phone, and it's great. Yeah, OnePlus, I've heard some pretty good things about OnePlus. I've turned into a very casual cell phone end user. Like I'm like in dad mode, I guess, like old man father time mode. Like I like my phone to be able to allow me to manage the brand and manage my business on the go. And once again, I'll play Clash of Clans to kill time, rather like if I'm waiting for Windows to update, or I'm waiting for a game to install, or waiting for a driver to install, or waiting at the NVA, something like that, some type of boring adult activity. I'll casually jump in and game, and then quite naturally I'll watch a lot of, if anything, most of the stuff I do on my phone, I'm watching YouTube, because I consume a lot of content on this platform. It's about as much as I produce, right? Like UGP, I've checked out some of your content, and D, I've watched some of your content. If you are a creator here on the channel, do message me your channel link, and I definitely want to check out your content. But I consume content on the platform just about as much as I produce it, arguably more, which that should be a little bit more balanced. But on my phone, I like to watch a lot of YouTube, casually play some games, and just manage the brand. So as long as the phone is fast, that's good enough for me. Everything else is like, I don't need a feature-written phone. UGP says, or AVX says, Amazon in Australia are scalpers. Yeah, and I believe you can sellers can privately sell on Amazon too. So, I mean, there's scalper sellers here on Amazon as well. And yeah, same. I mean, oh, Newegg is notorious with it. Newegg's been catching a lot of slack for it. Newegg, you know, and I'm especially I don't excuse me I don't approve of Newegg's lottery system too. I don't think it's a good practice to want to bundle, you know, force sellers to buy a motherboard, buy a part they may not even need, just to get the part that they do need. Lottery or not, like you're still paying more for a part you necessarily don't need, and it may not be the motherboard you want, or it may not be the ideal bundle for you. It's just not a good look and move by Newegg, in my honest opinion. But yeah, UGP says Bitcoin is like digital gold. It doesn't do much, but now all the altcoins, the alternative coins, are pumping. Yeah, like things like Ethereum. I normally don't plant myself in the Bitcoin conversation as much, but I do try to keep my nose planted in the ground with it. But I have seen different alternatives to Bitcoin popping up here recently and becoming more and more popular and more easier to mine. AVX says, what town hall are you in Clash of Clans? I'm maxed out. I'm maxed out on Clash of Clans, so I believe 13, town hall level 13. I stopped playing the game because I'm boycotting it until they give us a new builder town hall, which is like town hall 10 or 12 or something like that. But I mean, most of all my things are maxed out. Like most of all my buildings are maxed out. AVX says I'm town hall 9 because I'm a noob. My walls are 7, level 7. Yeah, you gotta play a little bit more. I've been playing the game for a while now. I believe since I got it in my first iPhone, or when it first came onto the iOS store. And UGP says, me too. I'm also watching on YouTube, the TV, to see the sound and video quality. Yeah, and I like to, when I'm driving and going along places, I like to like watch videos that necessarily are talking head videos or like podcast videos where it can just play in the background and I can do other things. So if I'm not listening to music, like I shared on my Twitter, which if you're not following me on Twitter yet, friends and fam, do follow me on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT, shameless plug. But follow me over on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT and Instagram at Inside the Lab YT. I shared over there that when I'm building, I like to listen to the RTJ4 album, Run the Jewels 4 album, and I can let that album just run all the way through, right, until I'm done the task of whatever it is I'm doing. And AVX says you're on Clash of Clans. You're in Clash of Clans. Sorry if I misread that, AVX. But yeah, he says you're an OG. Yeah, I've been playing for a while. I have been playing for a while, and I've only switched clans one time. But yeah, all good stuff. I do appreciate you. AVX and UGP. Thanks for adding to the conversation. Again, if you just joined us, right? Let's get back on topic, because if you just joined us, we're talking about power supply units and some of the most most important qualities and features you should look into a power supply unit. We talked about wattage output, efficiency, and modularity. Right now, we're in the middle of talking about efficiency rating and why efficiency matters, and how efficient your power supply is, right? So you're not wasting energy and heat. Tiger Nation, what's up, Zion? It's good to see you. Zion says you should take a listen to Shark Tank. Yeah, I've been watching Shark Tank for a while. I used to watch Shark Tank. I don't watch as much. Not as interesting. But Zion, is good to see you. But yeah, power supply efficiency, it depends on the rated load being output. Most power supply units, they run at a maximum efficiency of around 50% load, or 250 watts, right? For our 500 watt example, right? We say 500 for the simplicity's sake of math, right? If we're going with a whole number, 500 watts. Let's say our power supply is 500 watts. Most power supplies run at a 50%, efficiency at load. So in this case, we would indefinitely at 50% have a wattage output of 250 watts, right? So that's at a balanced load, if you will. I mean, that's like maybe browsing the internet, watching YouTube, doing loose things in the background. Not necessarily gaming, because, depending on the game, you normally want your GPU percentage to be at 100%. Like, you want the GPU to be the bottleneck, especially at 1080p, or any resolution, right? And the game you're playing. AVX says, I joined my first video. I watched by you was the 1050 Ti. Best $200 graphics card. Okay, yeah, it was the 1650 Super. Yeah, another one of my favorites, the 1650 Super. I love that. Or a nice graphics card, which is right there in the box still. We haven't cracked it open since that video. We gotta find some relevancy here in 2021 with it. But I do have some ideas because prices could be coming down on the 1650 Super, and especially until we get a 3050. If we get a 3050, see, we never got a 2050 with Turing. We just got, the 16 series. We didn't get, lower end 20 series with Turing, like a 2050 Ti or a RTX 2050. So we'll see if we get a 3050 and a 3050 Ti. But until then, 1650 Super with its 4 GB VRAM could be a viable option. Tiger Nation says, "Oh no, Snark Tank." Okay, all right, Zion. Well, you may have to tell me what that is more about it after. I mean, you may have to call me up or something. Tell me more about it. I'll look into it. And UGP says, "I remember that video." Yeah, the video that we're referring to is the 1650 Super review I did. Comprehensive review, might add. As we talked about, we looked at thermals, we looked at acoustics. I believe we touched on power draw using my Coolman watt meter, which I'm gonna break that out too with the RTX 90, and I'm going to reference this live stream. So again, if you're not yet subscribed to me, you're here on the replay. Definitely get subscribed because you're going to want to watch that video when it comes out, as it's going to give a real-time example on how TDP plays a role on depending on what you're doing on your system. AVX says, I gotta go. I gotta meet my friends. Bye. All right. Well, be safe, AVX, and thank you for joining in on our weekly live show. Do appreciate you. But yeah, so 80 plus certification. We talked about that in the beginning of the live stream, right? We talked about how most modern PSUs come with an 80 plus rating, right? Just standard. Even if you have just standard 80 plus with no metal attached to it, but you have bronze, silver, gold. XLRA Gaming says, "What do you think the future of ATX 12 volt would be?" Okay, so good question, XLR Gaming. And when I was doing research for this live stream, I think 12 volts on the rail will be less of an issue going forward with modern, like we say, with modern CPUs and modern motherboards, because of how well power is being regulated through the VRMs, like how much VRM improvements, how much VRMs have improved over time, and how good they are at regulating power. I don't think the 12 volt rail won't be as important of a factor with power supply units. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, and it's something that I definitely would want to revisit in the future as like a follow-up to this live stream. But very good question, XLR Gaming. And UGP Vlog says, "I'll check out your channel." Nice. Okay. I do appreciate it, UGP. We create awesome PC gaming content here at Inside the Lab. But again, going on to efficiency and why efficiency matters, and that's wasted power, in my honest opinion, because wattage from the AC to the DC conversion is wasted in heat. Where does that heat go? To other components, right back in the case, possibly if your airflow isn't adequate. The less efficient a power supply is, the more heat it'll generate. More heat means more wear and tear and a higher failure rate. Now, PSUs have 80 plus ratings like we talked about, right? And let me bring up my helpful card here, because PSUs have 80 plus ratings named after different metals. We talked about that in the live stream. The bronze being the least, with titanium being the most effective. You have bronze, gold, silver, platinum, titanium, and again the 80 plus with no metal attached to it. But bronze and silver, they're becoming more and more common in most consumer builds, right? So we talked about the need for healthy power being regulated on the 12 volt rail. Most power supplies are coming with 80 plus bronze, like even down. We're going to talk about it in some of the examples I'm gonna bring up. So most of them are coming with high efficiency ratings, where it's not as much as a problem as it would have been a couple years ago. But XLR8 gaming overclocks. I overclock. Chances are you are not in the market of a bronze rated power supply unit if you are looking to overclock. You're likely going to be at least in the silver gold area, even if you're going to rely on uh, XFR or not XFR, PBO, right? Or GPU Boost 2.0 over on NVIDIA's side, right? So, yeah, knowing which rating is good for your needs goes hand in hand with identifying your maximum expected wattage output, right? Which is also measured or determined hand in hand with your component's TDP, right? How much the maximum amount of heat generated at the CPU or GPU's load. So, yeah, you'll see these stickers. At first, you can consider them as like, you know, buzzwords or words that are used to advertise on boxes, but there is no industry standard for rating. So CPU and GPU chip makers, Nvidia, Intel, AMD, they kind of have their own methods of calculating, uh, you know, what a parts or what a CPU's TDP may be. Now, could a more energy efficient power supply save you money on your power or electric bill? Yes and no. But like in addition to potential savings on your power bill or your electric bill, a general rule of thumb is that the more efficient the power supply is, the better its longevity and reliability oftentimes will be. And that's with your PC as a whole. Like that's more important. Not so much as how much money you could save on your electric bill. That's important too. But depending on how much power you consume and other factors like other people living in your household, do they use their computers or do they use plug their devices into the wall? There's other contributing factors other than just your computer, being a single factor affecting your power bill. But more specific, having an efficient power supply unit is going to help. It's going to help maintain longevity and reliability, and that's important. Like a car, right? Most of us drive cars. I believe most of us drive cars. I drive a car. Right? If you own a car, you know how important it is to have your car last a long time and be reliable. Those two are definitely important, features you want in your automobile. Same thing with your computer, because like a car, your car can be a useful tool, right? It can get you to work. It can get you to Micro Center to get your parts, right? Your computer can help you with school. It can help you, with entertainment. It can help you create content. It can help you, with your photo business if you're a photographer. Um, Computers are tools, but again, yes, you can potentially save money on your power bill, but the more efficient a power supply unit is, the better it's going to be in longevity and reliability. So, and that's within your whole PC, not just your power supply unit. Good healthy power to your graphics card and your CPU. That's just as important, very much as important. So, moving along to the third and final most important factor to take into consideration when buying a power supply unit, and that is form factor, right? Form factor. You got on top of form factor, I mean, ATX, SFX, modular, semi-modular, non-modular, all of those things. You want to take in modularity when I guess when you're in the point of buying a case, like especially when you're buying a case, like if you're going with a small form factor build, even if you're going with the system integrator, you're going to have a smaller package, right? Now the system integrator, the builder, it's on that person to be aware of that quite naturally and obviously, but if you're building it yourself, right? Because our three-person example is either you are building a PC from the ground up for a friend or yourself, or you are upgrading your core components and you need additional power requirements or connectors, or your power supply unit failed, right? As PC enthusiasts, we can find ourselves almost in any of those three situations. XLR8 Gaming says, what about impact of cable extensions or cable replacements entirely? Well, that's a great question, XLR8 cable gaming, and that leads us into this segment here on why form factor is important, because knowing how long, or let me jump into the part with cable extension. So you can, with a fully modular power supply unit, you can choose what cables you want to use for your system. Better yet, you can go with custom cables, right? From like Cable Mod, just to name a few. There's so many different vendors you can choose from. But if you want to use custom cables, you want to go with a fully modular power supply. A benefit to a fully modular power supply, like me personally, when I'm looking for a power supply unit, I almost always go fully modular, right? Especially if the configuration is going in a case for an indefinite amount of time, I almost certainly go with a fully modular power supply. If I'm consulting a client, depending on if it can be integrated into their budget, I would recommend it. But if not, then I'll at least recommend a semi-modular power supply unit, so it gives you the option to at least, choose what cables you may need or may not need, or what you may want to add. Semi-modular, usually the CPU pin cable and the ATX 24 pin cable are the ones that are non-modular, the ones you can't replace and change. So it leaves you open to like PCIe and SATA, custom SATA extension cables. And then you have non-modular power supply units, where, as the name implies, you are unable to pick and choose the cables you want to use for your system, and you can't replace them with custom cables. Now, custom cables are pretty cool. I mean, they are a little pricey, but if you're ready to take your aesthetic game to the next level with your system, custom cables are a perfect way to do it. But you either need a fully modular or semi-modular power supply unit. Using tools like, I do want to add that, using tools like PCPartPicker.com, and we're going to jump here in a second to round out this segment. Damon says, catch you later, peace. And thank you, Damon. I do appreciate too. Thank you for hanging out here on the live stream. The Mr. Zombified says, cable mod cables equals win for style and function. And I agree wholeheartedly, the Mr. Zombified. Cable mod is one of the vendors I highly recommend if one would be interested in going with custom cables. You may or may not see cable mods appear here in some of the builds we're going to do coming up here on the channel. But PCPartPicker.com has an interesting, helpful tool with a system integration process where, it'll let you know if you're running into incompatibility issues, where, for example, if the graphics card you picked out, right? Like we had an example provided with 3 8-pin graphics cards becoming more common. So if your graphics card requires 3 8-pin connections, but the power supply unit you picked out only has 1 8-pin connection, then PC Part Picker will alert you to that issue and suggest you fix it by choosing a power supply unit that's compatible with your graphics card. And you can change your search. What I highly recommend is that in PC Part Picker, you change your search to compatibility mode, so that each segment you're seeing parts that are compatible with each other. For example, EATX motherboard, PC Part Picker will only show you EATX power supply or EATX cases and power supplies that are able to supplement enough power to the motherboard. XLR Gaming says, I mean, some factory PSU cables have capacitors in them that help fight ripple, and aftermarket replacements don't have them. Yeah, and the key word there is some, right? Some. It depends on the quality of the cables and or capacitors, and most importantly, what most people don't take into consideration too is if the cables are braided or if they're not braided, right? I mean, it can purely come down to aesthetic, but either way, like Sparta Rules mentioned earlier in the live stream, your power supply is a component you shouldn't skimp on in terms of both functionality and in terms of aesthetics, right? Like, you want your power supply to be efficient enough to power your components under certain workloads. Maybe you also want your power supply to have a certain aesthetic look and feel to it. Going fully modular also opens you up to a future upgrade path as well, right? Like being able to just swap out, say, hey, if you want to switch to that 3 8-pin, I guess a bad example, because you would likely with 3 8-pin power supply, you're likely in the 1,000-watt plus range. But excuse me, a better example would be if you're going from, say, like a 6-pin 1660 Ti right? And you want to maybe go to like an 8-pin RT, maybe like a Pascal based graphics card, then you definitely want to be able to, or having even a semi-modular power supply unit will make that upgrade path so much more easier, so much more easier. And then the same thing even for having the right EPS pins for your CPU, right? Like most CPUs require 8-pin, but if it's a high-end motherboard that's kind of built for overclocking, right? It'll have a supplemental 4-pin power connection that you can use too, to either provide more power to the CPU or allow power to go to other components, while that additional 4-pin power connection is providing power to the CPU. So, and I mean PC Part Picker, and I tell you what, let's jump over. We're going to jump over to PC Part Picker, because PC Part Picker, this is a tool, in my opinion, that's really helpful, that most inexperienced builders that are here can really benefit from and help them out when building their new PC. So coming here to PCPartPicker.com, and we have a 9700K, right? Which I believe I saw this CPU is $306 here, which says Amazon, but I saw it at Micro Center for under $299, which is an incredible value for a 9700K. I mean, it doesn't have hyper-threading, but that's 8 really fast cores. Then we have a Z390 Asus Prime motherboard, standards 32 gigabyte, 16 gigabyte kit of memory, and an RTX 3070 with an estimated wattage of 414 watts. So a little under our prime example we've been using for this whole entire live stream of 500 watts. But if we go down here, if I were to change this, because I believe the RTX 3070, this one is a, let me see, 2 8-pin. Okay. And so our power supply, we have to make sure we choose a power supply unit that supports that. But because I'm in compatibility mode, or that's case, power supply unit. So I'm in compatibility mode. So PC Part Picker will show me power supply units that have 2 8-pin, that supports 2 8-pin graphics cards, right? And a lot of good choices here. We have 80 plus bronze, 600 watt 80 plus bronze. But I'm looking for the EVGA G2, which I don't see. You can see if you have semi-modular. But if I were to add, let me change the graphics card. Let me do this. Because I want to show, so I want to change the graphics card. And this is telling me that the 9700K doesn't come with a cooler, telling me to add a cooler. But if I chose the power supply first, if I just went with this Corsair CX model, let me see how many pins is it. Let's see. Okay, 2 6+2 pin connectors. Okay, let's change it to 1 6+2 connector. So if I add this power supply unit, which is still telling me that it doesn't come with a cooler, and I go into the video cards, now it's only showing me graphics cards that are compatible with that power supply unit. See, we have 1660 Super, 1650 Super. Looks like the 3060 Ti, maybe 2060 Super, but it looks like the 3060 Ti is the highest graphics card, right, that is supported using this power supply unit. And that's why PC Part Picker is a great tool. It's something I recommend vehemently here on the channel that you use, even if you're just early in the research process or research phase with your build, whether that's if you're building it yourself or you're working with a system integrator and you already know the parts that you picked out or the parts that was available to the system integrator, and you want to familiarize yourself with those parts. We talked about that in like one of the earlier live streams. Let me jump over here into the chat. I see XLR Gaming says, I hate those pasta flat ribbon PSU cables. Yeah, they're not the most aesthetically pleasing of the of PSUs to choose from. But again, it goes to why you shouldn't skimp on your budget here. I mean, this is an area, in my opinion, where you shouldn't. If you do, dare I say, if there's an area you want to skim on, I would maybe say storage. Like, instead of wanting to go, I can't afford like one, high capacity storage, I'm gonna try to go with 2. I would always recommend try to go with your single highest, the single amount you can afford. But I mean, really, there's no general area you want to skip on with your part. You want to try to have a very balanced and accommodating system once you're building. And power supply units are a very are intricate, an intricate part to that process. And now, what are some power supply units to round out here, or some brands that I recommend? Well, this is why I asked you, a lot of you who are here, if you just joined us, or some, I know we had a lot of friends and fan that left, but that's why I asked you earlier, what wattage were you using? Because, and I also want to know what brand. Forgot to ask, but brand is important too. But as you can see here, some of the most popular even pops up, EVGA. EVGA has an incredible warranty process with their power supply units. Corsair too, and it really boils down to Corsair and EVGA in terms of, if I were to recommend a brand, a power supply unit brand for you to start with, Corsair and EVGA, and definitely would be the first two I would start you off. It's the first two I go for, depending on, if it's for a personal need or for a customer's need. Those are the two power supplies. I've worked so much with Corsair and EVGA power supply units, and I have not yet have one of them give me any issues. Like, I just haven't. Rose Hill makes some pretty decent power supply units too, depending on, the year it was manufactured. And let me see if I can go to our filters here and limit it to EVGA. We have EVGA, Corsair, and scroll down here to Roswell. So, I mean, those three power supply unit manufacturers are the three I would recommend you take a look at indefinitely. EVGA has incredible warranty, 10 years on most of them. They're a little pricey though. Corsair is like a little bit balanced of between the two, and Rose Hill normally offers like lower end efficient, or lower end rated power supply units. I need a SF power supply unit for my small form factor build. Yay. But yeah, so Corsair, EVGA, Rose Hill, they all make pretty good power supply units, right? So if you have a fully modular power supply unit here, 600 watts, which is a little pricey. Looks like power supply unit prices have gone up a little bit. But again, depending on what you're doing, this is why it's important to know what your expected system wattage output is going to be, right? Because that way you won't overspend, and you won't like spend more money than you have to. If your system, like for example, let me add this power supply unit. With the RTX 3070 we had added on, I believe we were at 414 estimated watts, but again, that's with Intel's 9700K running at this clock speed right here, 3.6 gigahertz. I was actually correct. I said 3.6. I don't know why I said I thought it was 4.2. But the 9700K running at 3.6 gigahertz, that is what its TDP is based off of. But if you add, even a Cooler Master Hyper 212, what's this what's it rated at? Okay, so won't tell me. But if you go with the Cooler Master Hyper 212, right? Which again, you see that annoying warning disappeared, and we add our 3070. See if I can find it. There we go. Founders Edition 3070. We're at 424 watts. Now, this power supply unit, if we can find it, is rated 80 plus gold. So that puts it at about 83 to 84% efficiency rating at 100% load. So it'll draw about 800 watts from your wall, I believe, if my math serves me correct. It'll serve about 800 watts from the wall to achieve this maximum peak output. Now, if you're cooling, maybe on a cooler Hyper 212, maybe you can boost up to maybe 4.2, 4.3 maybe. Not quite sure. But you have the headroom to accommodate you have the headroom with your power supply unit to accommodate any additional heat and wattage being introduced in your system from either your 9700K or your RTX 3070. For 424 watts, which I would say even at turbo speeds for both the CPU and GPU, you might be inching closer to that 500 watt mark. So you're pushing it, like you're floating there. But this is pretty, even by today's standards, this is considered pretty high end here. Which we're not even going to talk about the cost. Let's take a look at $799. Well, it's not factoring in the cost of the graphics card, but we'd be way over. I mean, even at MSRP, we'll be well over a grand, and we still have yet to add what, case, storage. Yeah. Now, obviously, we want to maybe make some changes to the cooler, maybe invest a little bit more there. But yeah, PC part picker, definitely a helpful tool with, part out your system and finding the right parts for your build so that you're not spending too much money than what you should. Now, those are the brands that I would recommend. You can always certainly go with what you're comfortable with. Do your own research, do your own due diligence when shopping for your power supply unit. It is arguably one of the parts that have the highest chance of failing on you if it's ill conceived, right? If you don't properly plan for your power supply unit in terms to be able to, have the right amount of headroom, right, to accommodate your CPU and GPU, and also to take into consideration uh, of your CPU reaching, boosting up to a higher clock speed, or your GPU using GPU 2.0 and boost it up to a higher clock speed as well, because your GPU can, turbo up to a certain clock speed if the temperature overhead is there. That's why most people believe overclocking is becoming less and less important, because CPUs and GPUs are getting better and better at reaching the highest possible frequency across a generalized board, especially when temperatures and things like that are already taken into consideration. But again, every component you choose from plays an essential role with delivering a playable and solid end user experience. And that's very different from myself and XLRA Gaming or UGP or the Mr. Zombified and Damon and a lot of other great lab fam and people that we had here on the live stream. Each one of us have different needs, right? Like some of us like to overclock, some don't. Some of us just want to step up in game. Some of us want to try to hit world records or what have you. And like I said, some of us just want to sit down and enjoy the system. But each one of our systems will generate different amounts of power, or will generate different amounts of heat, because it's generating different amounts of power based off of what we are doing. But yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry if this information, if this material kind of like, it's a lot to take in. It really is. And I had toyed with the idea of breaking this live stream up into two parts, because it is a lot to take in, and there's so much more you could go into detail, and other areas you should look at, especially if you're not the typical end user, and you consider yourself like a high-end enthusiast, right? Like you overclock or you use high-end hardware. But if you're using components that don't have high power draws, like the 1660 or 1650 Super, for example, or even the 1660 Ti. Like we tested the 1650 Super's power draw. Like that whole system was pulling under 200 watts, I believe, under 300 watts. So it was really low. And I was using a 750 watt G3 EVGA power supply unit on the test box, right? I don't have our dedicated test bed anymore. But yeah, I mean, so this conversation, this topic, it is likely one we will revisit in a normal VOD or a normal video on here on the channel. XLR Gaming says 212 is a 150 to 180 watt rated cooler. So yeah, so maybe not suitable for for an i7, but maybe for like an i5 or Ryzen 5 CPU maybe, or maybe Ryzen 7. But for high end i7, you can go in. Maybe what I'd recommend, like if I did an Intel build for somebody, I'd really try to say, hey, try to modify your budget and accommodate at least a 120 millimeter AIO. Right, you would get huge benefits from allowing your CPU to boost to, it's to really let it stretch its wings. But you're right, 212 with its 100, it's rated 150, 180 watts. You're quite there with what the 9700K was at 124 watts at base frequency. So if you're going to boost, it's going to be like right there at the ceiling. So that's a little too close for comfort. Hyper 212, maybe maybe not a perfect example. Maybe want to go with like a higher end air cooler if water is not your thing. Not everybody wants water in their case. Like I understand, but there's some really good high end air cases you can go with. Of course, Noctua being one of the one of the premium ones to choose from. But good stuff, XLR Gaming, as always, for coming through with the supplemental knowledge and information. But, ladies and gentlemen, I think the ride is slowly coming to an end. Right? If you're here and you've been lurking, now's your chance to come out. Tell us, tell us if you have if you have any questions about any of the things we talked about. If you don't want to ask them, if you don't want to ask me here in the live stream, I definitely welcome you to follow me over on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT. Also follow me over on Instagram at Inside the Lab YT. Our Instagram is one of the platforms I really want to build up here going forward in 2021 with showing you more of the things I do here in the lab when I'm not on camera. And that's very different with Twitter, which I kind of keep you updated with the stream of information about new content, new videos we're planning, any new videos that might come out. Towards Instagram, I want it to be a little bit more personal. Plus, I really do want to follow, if you're here, you're a lab fan, you're here on the live stream or you're here on the replay, head over there now, shoot me a message, shoot me a DM. Let me know you follow me, you're from the channel, and I definitely will follow you back. I want to follow your stream as much as you follow mine, and that's for both Twitter and on Instagram. So definitely give me a follow over there. But I think the ride is slowly coming to an end. I want to give a shout out to everybody that stopped by, starting with XLR Gaming. With shout out to XLR Gaming, always here supporting the stream and supporting the shows. Mad respect, mad props. Do appreciate that. David Warren that was here earlier. I know D left, but I do appreciate him. The Mr. Zombified, another regular. I definitely appreciate you always showing up and supporting the stream, man. I tell you what, I'm nothing without the audience. I'm nothing without the audience. I am definitely not perfect. I am flawed, fan, but I am working on getting better because going deeper into this field and learning as much as I can to come back and share that information in an entertaining and valuable way is one thing I strive for as a content creator here on the platform. So I do appreciate you guys and gals coming out and supporting me. UGP Vlogs, another fellow creator with D, Tiger Nation, my son, he's a Zion, AVX Replays, I think he was new here on the channel or a first time viewer to the live show. Let me go up, make sure Sparta Rules, definitely can't forget my guy Sparta Rules, right? And our moderator, Kimberly, definitely shout out to our moderator for keeping the conversation live and full effect. And I know we had Tricion also that was here on a live show, right? Another regular. But again, this has been your topic of power supply units and why they are important. A few things to take into consideration. If you just joined us, which I see we had a few people just joining here on the live stream, you've kind of came around the tail end. We've talked about power supply units, a few things you should look into, a few things you should look out for, and a few features you should look into when buying a power supply unit or shopping for a power supply unit. We talked about the significance of wattage output, why efficiency matters, right? And why modularity matters. We talked about TDP, which means thermal design point, right? And that's it's a measurement of the maximum amount of heat generated by a CPU or GPU under an intense load. They go hand in hand with power draw, but you can't have one without the other, right? They both are very much important. It's good to use them both, right? When you're trying to make a conscious decision or you're trying to make a decision on buying your power supply unit, right? Power TDP, your power draw, your estimated expected wattage. Will you be overclocking? Are you going AMD, Intel? Do you have future plans on upgrading down the road? Like if you go with Ryzen, if you're on Ryzen AM4 platform, you're like, well, I have my eyes on a AM4 B550 motherboard, right? And say a 3600 because 5000 series CPUs, they're hard to get. I mean, they're even harder to find versus versus some of the GPUs, right? Like Ryzen 5000 stock, it just seems like uber rare to come across. So while maybe not a good example because the TDP difference won't be all that much going from a 3600 to a 5600, but more so especially if you're switching video cards, right? And you need more power overhead. Go research your parts, right? Take all those things into consideration. The hotter the hotter a part runs, CPU or GPU, the hotter a component runs, the more heat it'll generate. This, this degrades the component over time. So this is why it's important to have a power supply that is efficient enough, even at least for your needs. Accelerated Gaming says later to Mr. Zombify. Yeah, definitely, Mr. Zombify. Thanks for hanging out. We're just wrapping up here. And Accelerated Gaming says Noctua NHD15 is the champ. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the NHD15, very popular air cooler. Very popular air cooler. And then XLR says shout out to Mr. Han Slomo. I believe, yeah, Han Slomo. Yeah, over on Twitter. We got a nice we all, I mean, we all talk to each other over on Twitter. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty fun to not only have to wait until now uh to be able to talk and to communicate and to conversate. I welcome you. Follow us over on Twitter. We got a nice little community, and we're always sharing photos and sharing some of our wins and losses even over there on Twitter. So definitely follow me over on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT. And if you're here on the replay, I do want to thank you for watching the replay. Shout out to our replay viewers. You guys and gals are just as important as our live viewers here right now on the live stream. I know the times can be wonky. I do apologize for flexing the Saturday live stream to Sunday, and any plans you might have set aside to prepare on Saturday, or any plans you might have had here today on Sunday. I do appreciate most of you hanging about and spending a good chunk of your time here on a live show. I do appreciate it. And the live shows will continue to evolve and get better in terms of not just equipment, but in terms of delivering the information in a valuable way, or in an important way. Accelerated Gaming says, yeah, thanks fam. Love the show and the community. Yeah, trust me, the show, I'm nothing, the show is nothing without the community. I am nothing without the community, right? The community is what makes it possible. The community is what makes it, possible. It's what makes it important, right? Yeah, again, the show is nothing without the community, and I'm nothing without the community. Definitely appreciate the support. And AVX says, I'm back. AVX Ram Plays. Well, welcome back. I was just signing off and saying goodbye to everybody. But now that you're on, I do appreciate you stopping by on a live show and you hanging out. I believe you weren't on when we were saying our final goodbyes to everybody. But AVX Ram Plays, I do appreciate you stopping by on the live show. And if you need any more help with your, with your system or with your configuration, again, give me a holler over on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT, as it's spelled, as it sounds. Same thing over on Instagram. Okay, again, we're trying to build that Instagram up. We want to build that Instagram up for this year, for the 2021. All right, get more eyes on behind the scenes. Let you know, let you in the mind of Inside the Lab, if you will. But I'm very particular over some things. Some things I don't like to spoil. I'm not super secretive, but I do like to keep certain things pretty close to the chest until we're ready to show it. You know what I mean? But excuse me. But yeah, AVX says okay. Yeah, AVX definitely. And that's with all things in general. Like, you're starting out building your computer, you're likely bound to have more questions along the way. From XMP profiles to overclocking to more details in the build process itself. If you have any questions about it, definitely feel free to either ask them here on the channel, right? You can come to any, especially our live streams, right? Like, the live stream comment section is like an open forum, if you will, right? Especially if it's on the topic, especially if the question is about the topic in the live stream, right? The live stream comment sections are like open forums. So if you have a question about the build process, especially if we've talked about it, if we covered it in a live stream, come back here, ask that question either here or on my socials, and I will do my best to point you in the right direction if I am unable to help you myself. But like I said, friends and fam, I think the ride is slowly coming to an end. I do thank everybody for coming out and spending their time with here on this Flex Sunday live stream. Thanks for hanging out. I do hope to catch you on the next one. So until then, be easy. long as you love it and you know it. And now again, special shout out to everybody who stopped by. Tiger Nation, what's up? Thanks for stopping by. And please do enjoy some of my favorite moments from creating content here with our live show wrap up. Accelerate Gaming, peace out, brother. Thanks again for hanging out, fam. Thanks for all your support, always showing up, supporting the mission, supporting the brand, supporting everything. All right.
学的知道。